right, Facebook, thanks for joining us. It's the D18 after party. For my co-host Sabrina Salas-Mentanani, my name is Chris Barnett, and let's go ahead and introduce our guests from the Ogalimtiaco Unity Division. Right? Did I get that
Representative.
right?
Representative in the Unity Committee for the Democratic Party. Hafidea Mabuhay, I'm Jezzica de la Pena.
All right, and we also have the General Manager of PBS Guam / Acting Director of DOC / almost senatorial candidate. Start calling you / K. Baltazar. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And Senator Tommy Morrison, who of course is hanging up his senatorial hat. This is going to be your last term. Thank you for joining us. And,
Thank you.
A couple Democrats tonight.
Yeah, interesting group. So just, I guess, your general observations and what you thought on how they did.
I actually thought they did fantastic. I felt like they had very well thought out answers. Mm-hmm. Also, for the record, I'm the Republican Party of Guam secretary.
Stump away.
Yeah. So, hashtag almost. No. I thought they had very well thought out answers. I obviously paid very special attention to the question about the inmates, recidivism reduction, and things like that. So I felt like, for me, their answers were kind of both parts of the coin, both sides of the coin. Mm-hmm. Is what I'm trying to say. They had, it is a psychological issue. It does take education and familial support. A lot of it is economics. A lot of it is that. It's education. It's everything. It's all those things. And when you're trying to work within a system that is limited in resources, and you're working with people who are very, very broken when you get them, trying to make them whole again within a system that is resistant to that, can sometimes, a lot of times, be a challenge.
Pretty impossible.
Not impossible. We've shown a lot of successes in the prison, as you know.
Right. Yeah.
And most recently with our women inmates. The key, though, is consistency and constantly, being able to reinforce them, and it's a constant reinforcement of value in their place in society.
Senator Morrison, as someone who's been in the legislature for more than a minute, politically though, if you're not talking about keeping these inmates locked up, if you're talking about issues, I don't feel like inmate recidivism, I don't think it's a hot button issue. I don't really think that it's one of those issues that people campaign on. It's kind of just fallen by the wayside. I mean, people want to be tough on crime, and by extension, they want to be tough on inmates. So, politically, for you, how safe do you think it is to talk, sympathetically about these, career-hardened criminals?
Well, it is very challenging to share with folks, your side of the story. I visited the prison on 2 occasions, mm-hmm. and I walked the halls, and I had a chance to meet with these individuals, and they're human beings in there, and there's some that are really trying to make themselves a better person. And I think when you go out and try to explain to folks, aside from those that I consider very serious crimes or criminals in there, you have to figure out how to balance that with our community. That we are trying to figure out a way to, yes, we need to lock up and maybe throw away the keys with some individuals,
right.
but there are those that they made a mistake, and they we need to help them. We need to find a way. So I think I've, at least sitting up there in those seats, I try to convey those message as much as I can, that I've walked those halls. I've went in there and saw firsthand. I thank the DOC management for inviting the legislature down. I know that there were some that were probably timid to take a walk in there, but like they say, you gotta sometimes take a site visit to really know
right.
and understand what's really happening in there.
Jezzica, let's talk about the large number of inmates that are in DOC on drug charges, and this is something that I wasn't sure if the candidates really touched on. Was kind of that social aspect of, the war on drugs and, how DOC, I mean, I'm not sure statistically, but I'm pretty sure about half or maybe even more of those inmates are in there, for drug charges. So,
Well, definitely, drugs is a problem here in Guam, and rehabilitating them while they're in there is very important, not only with their addiction, but also working with them on what can they do for us when they come out as an individual into the community. Can they actually be somebody that would advocate for no drugs, no trafficking, and help the others.
And I think that's what Armando was trying to get across in his response about the psychological aspects. So,
yes, and also, he also actually talked about the Bible and faith is very important.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
well, one of the things that they started off with was priorities, right? They were asked, what would be your priority if you were to get elected? And so Armando responded that he thinks that we need to improve and address the taxation problems on Guam, while Tina responded that she felt that her priorities were going to be improving education, public safety, and health. What did you think about their responses?
I felt like, again, they were representative of two sides of the argument. Taxing versus collecting what's owed. And that's exactly what the balance has to be, right? Another thing that that struck me was, we can't always assume though that the collection of taxes is really that easy. It's not like you just do a call out and people come in droves and want to pay these taxes, and so I think it's quite a few more steps before you can get from, hey, pay your taxes, and or hey, pay this sales tax, and so on. So I think the system, and probably Senator Morrison can speak to this more, is there probably just has to be an update too in the policy and how things like property taxes and other things like that are handled with regard to collection. We have for example, for property taxes, we have a very emotional connection to our land, and we're empathetic that way. And in other places, if you don't pay your taxes on your property, it gets seized and sold, and we, might not be likely to do that here, because of our value and our sense of place culturally to our land. So is it a policy issue? Is it a cultural issue? Those are discussions that have to be held before we can really say, well, you owe taxes. Yes, you should pay them. But what's the kind of in between there,
Why aren't you running again? I'm thinking, why
Let's talk about that. I
mean, it was kind of, I get asked that all the time, and there's always some kind of like, why weren't you running? Like some kind of sort of sinister thing in the background. It was a combination of things, just a lot of some strategic things happening, familial things going on, things within my team that maybe weren't panning out the way I wanted. And career-wise, I really felt like I was in a really good place, both at DOC and then having been at PBS. I felt like those are really good places that I really wanted to put legs on, before I went on to something more.
So what about your role with the party? I mean, I really feel like, with a lot of the news that's coming out, especially with some of the special and staff assistants kind of getting those political black eyes. Maybe they need someone outside looking in like you to kind of maybe steer some responses.
Sure. I mean, they're in a really tough spot too. I really empathize with them, truly, because I think a lot of they get a lot of that heat, and I don't envy them right now. But I can say just for myself, apart from that, and then kind of, there was a filing deadline looming. It was budget season, so there weren't any confirmation hearings or session, happening, and so it was kind of like all these things that kind of spoke to me and said, you should suspend your campaign before that deadline, and then really rally everyone for the next run in 2020. So I will be back. I will be back.
Senator Morrison, I want to ask you, with Senator Tina Munoz Barnes, I mean, tough loss, you know. She took an L last election, finished 16th. The people of Guam, you know, that was a really tough election. They kind of issued a mandate. Do you think that they're ready to welcome Senator Barnes back in? And do you really think that they booted her out because it was pretty close?
Oh, it was an interesting election, and I think this one's also going to be an interesting one. There's 9 vacancies, but I had a really great working relationship with Senator Barnes. She was able to reach across the aisle and share her ideas and reach compromise. She did really well with the tourism committees, working well with the GVB board. So she has a lot of I would say institutional knowledge of how the branch works, and I can say I just had a really good working relationship with her. And I think it's a challenge for anyone running to get their message across.
Right.
And I think it comes down to that.
I know we asked this of the last guest analyst that we had in studio, and it was about, do you feel that we're going to see a Democratic majority in the 35th Guam legislature?
Jezzica, I mean, is the
Yeah.
Democrat?
Well, that's what we're working for. It's our unity and a Democratic majority, and that would be something good for us, something different for the island, and it might help us. So we are working together to make that happen, and so it's whatever the people are willing to have as far as changes. We need a lot of changes here in our government.
Right, and so
And
we
that
have
would be one of them.
Senator Barnes making a comeback, and candidate Dominguez. I mean, this is a guy that's run a few times. Do you think that maybe is it second, third time is going to be a charm for him, or do you think that we could be calling Tina Munoz Barnes senator again?
Well, I think they're both very good candidates. I mean, I haven't seen everybody else's platform, so they're here today to provide us their information, and they're very well knowledgeable and intelligent about the issues that's happening. So it's just a matter of getting their word out and showing their faces and getting everybody's votes and winning their hearts. So that'll be dependent on their campaign.
I see you took some notes there. What'd you write down? She was the only one that took notes.
Well, I wanted to take some notes so that I can actually know what their platform is, because I did actually went through Facebook and try to find out what everyone's messages are in their platform, and I only had a few candidates that actually reached out to me and to tell me what it is. So basically, I think they're probably still thinking about what they want to say, and so I'm looking forward to that.
I feel like Dominguez he's going to be one of these like wild card guys. You know what I mean? I don't think that his political views are going to fall strictly on the left. I kind of see him as someone who's willing to work both sides of the aisle. And with Senator Tina Munoz Barnes, I mean, she's in we're in her heart, right?
Yeah.
She's kind of like, that's kind of been her thing, right? Compassionate, and we don't really have that kind of candidate in the legislature right now. Someone who just, when my brother had a stroke,
trying to think.
Senator Barnes came to the hospital, and she was the only senator who did. And so I always remember that. She brought a little heart-shaped pillow, and that's kind of been her thing, right? And like Senator Morrison said, willing to work across both sides of the aisle. Do you think that Senator, we need to see more cooperation in the legislature between both parties?
Certainly, that's it comes down, these issues that are before us are issues that shouldn't be looked at from a Republican view or a Democratic view. I think we got to gather the data. I mean, ensure that we're basing these decisions on data and information from the experts that are before us, and sometimes that's a challenge because
Data's boring.
As much as the data tells you this, it's a challenge for some to either maintain the party line, and this is play the opposition, and and sometimes it's challenging to see that when the data is right in front of you, and these are experts' recommendations. But I certainly hope that there'll be abilities for those individuals to work with each other, find a compromise. you know, and hopefully that we'll see that in the 35th.
Well, I think it's not just the legislature working within itself. It also should be a partnership working with the administration
Right.
and the legislature.
And
because
the
at the end of the day,
relationship,
the
it's
common
been very
goal is to
adversarial.
care for the people. So it's kind of unfortunate. Just even today, you saw Fernando Esteves and the press releases between, Adelie was coming out with all these press releases today because of the vote on the sales tax. And so Adelie comes out with a press release, and then you see Fernandez, and he's like, "Stay in your lane," like, wow, there's like rapid fire. Regine came out with a press release, so I think
I think that's the big problem. I think that instead of talking through press releases,
just
you know what I mean. Say what you will about the tax increase and stuff with the governor. I mean, he made an effort. He came down to the legislature. I mean, you might argue that he wasn't very cordial when he did, but I think we need to see. I mean, damn, we're living on the same island. I mean, these guys are within 2 miles of each other, and instead of communicating with each other, it's press release, press release, press release.
I certainly agree with you. During the first go around, when we were trying to figure out how to address the federal jobs tax cut, that it's adversarially impacting our government revenues, I was driving back and forth during those marathon sessions, and I was inviting colleagues to join me, and I there was no hidden secret of what was going on, and I wish, like you said, we were a mile or 2 miles away.
Right.
We could have hopped in a car and just drive down there, see what's going on, and where we can go from here. But it's a challenge reading this press release and painting. Trying to read between the lines and what are they trying to say about
Right.
you?
Sometimes you don't even need to read between the lines.
Yeah.
It's all right there.
Since we are kind of talking about unity, I wanted to ask about the different parties and whether or not you guys have signed unity pledges. Because I know in the last election, the Republican Party, I believe, signed unity pledge. The Democratic Party also signed a unity pledge, with the exception of Senator Michaelson Nicholas. So has that already transpired?
Well, we do have something coming up similar. I won't let the jig out just yet. I think the Republicans demonstrate unity regardless of a pledge or not. I mean, it's important to have a document that everybody signs, but I think we're unified in our choices, in our candidates. We have a single candidate, and for governor and lieutenant governor. We have a great slate of senatorial candidates. So to us, we're rallying our side and looking towards success. So we will have something formal, of course, but I think that we try to. We just had our Lincoln Day dinner recently. That was very well attended and very inspiring, in many ways, and kind of reaffirms our place. And I think that our party has taken a lot of hits nationally and locally, as we all know. And it goes without saying. It's hard, it's tough being in the GOP these days, because there's a guy at the helm, who's like, who's that guy, and but
Tremendous.
Yeah. So, but that's just a day in the life, right? It's what we do, and we reiterate that, we are one, we're one team, one fight, and at the end of the day, we're all one island is more important. After the primary, the general happens, and the morning after, we're all neighbors, we're all pumping gas next to each other, we're all standing in line at Payless together, so it's how we are. I think Senator Tommy too. I think he's been also great. I wish he was running also, but so yeah, we do have something planned, and we will definitely let you know.
I think that
Democrats.
Democrats, right? I mean, everyone talks about Democratic
that's
unity.
the big election,
right?
It is. I mean, there's 4 candidates right now, and
Jess and I are old friends, by the way.
Yes.
So
Right.
you know, we've worked on projects, gender
cool. We're
equality
cool over
projects.
here.
Yeah, we're cool over
Yeah,
here.
very cool. Very cool.
We believe in gender equality. You know, so do Republicans, by the way.
Yeah, so in the subject of the Democratic unity, yes, it has been a challenge in the past, but this time around, each candidate has a representative, and we do meet periodically to talk about our unity, and a pledge would be coming along, and just don't want to just like.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
I know. I wanted to say, so have those meetings been a little heated
I hear they're
recently?
heated.
Oh no, no,
Not
not
at all.
at all, not
Never.
at all. Yeah, it's very
It's like,
positive.
yeah, Jessica,
We
do
take-
tell.
Yeah, so we do take a stand on being positive and how we're actually going to work this together.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the Democrats take a lot of flack. I mean, and I don't think the Republican Party is as rosy as Kate is saying. I mean, you do have factions in both parties, but I think
Oh,
it's
certainly.
healthy. It's definitely healthy. I mean, if you think about it, right, you have, uber conservatives and then people who tend to be more moderate, like Senator Morrison, and then on the Democratic side, it's the same thing. You have, like, the grassroots Democrats, and then you have, like, the Hillary Democrats. So, I mean, I'd like to see this healthy exchange of ideas. And, as just a fan of politics, I like that you guys have 4 teams running. I think it's great.
That's
But
the
I think, like,
largest or
Right,
biggest amount
yeah.
I've seen.
I think from a
I've been covering
strict,
elections a long time.
it also says something when none of you guys want to be number 2. I mean, everyone wants to be governor, no
Well,
one
of
wants to be
course,
lieutenant governor.
everybody does.
Right.
Right?
That's the money spot right there.
Yeah, so that's where we unify when after the primary election. I mean, everyone is going out there to see who's going to win that primary seat, and we're all going to unify for the general election.
How serious are you guys taking this? Because the rap like Uncle Carl gets is like if he loses, he's going to jump ship and cross the river and help the Republicans. So
Well, that's a wrap, but we do have a representative from, their campaign, so we are actually together right now, and so we shall see. But-
Who are the representatives, the unity
Okay,
representatives? from
so
the
we
different camps?
have former Senator Duenas and also former Senator Francis Santos
Okay.
and also Joe Miskin.
right.
Yeah.
And so what I wonder is with what do they call it, Troy Apocalypse? You guys
No,
have-
last week Callan said it was
Destroy. Yeah.
No,
Mission destroy.
No. It's disruption, corruption. That's what she called it.
Yeah.
Corruption, disruption.
So while you guys have a unity pledge, you have guys like Troy Torres, who hey, I mean, he's definitely making things more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But he comes out and he says, "Oh, Frank Uggin's corrupt." So
Yeah.
I feel like with him kind of being labeled as someone who's working for the Rodriguez Cruz campaign, how much does that affect you guys' unity when at the end of the day you got to sit here and
Well, at the end of the day, when we do have our meetings, we still keep it unified.
yeah.
Well, because this is politics, you will have all that hits,
Sure.
and so we just look at that as a part of the game, and as long as we stay positive and unified at the end of the day, that's our goal.
I mean, you guys obviously want to see them not unified to your advantage, right? You're like, hey, you guys keep fighting. We're just going to stand on the side over here.
It's definitely interesting. It has gotten interesting early.
Right.
Wouldn't you agree? You kind of expect that in an election year, right? And good strategists will sort of plan for those things, and even before you run, I mean, and someone who like myself, who is like, again, #almost, right? You kind of go through this. Thing, right? When you run, like, what are all the things in your closet?
Boy.
What are all the things that and you really go through this. You go through this entire kind of sanitation, like this. What is happening? What has happened in your life that could possibly disrupt your bid? And so going forward, you kind of got to already know that and have it in the back of your mind. But I just feel like it really got interesting early.
Right.
There's always what we call in politics the October surprise, right? Mm-hmm. There's always something like between the primary and the general, right, that comes out September, October, something like that. the October surprise, like Trump had one and Hillary had one and so on. And so, I mean, we're looking at, the February, March, April, May, June, July surprise, So it is definitely interesting, definitely interesting.
Senator Morrison, you've always kind of been the classy senator, so to speak. I mean, you don't really get dirty. I mean, I've been down there to Session Hall, and you're always calling for, like, people to be rational and maybe less emotional in their
You've had a
arguments.
few fights.
Moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What do you make of the dirty stuff that's been going on?
the people elected me to make some really tough decisions on the many issues that are before us, and that's my focus. And then, and again, I go back to those folks that are in these capacities, that so to speak, the experts that will present the information to make a responsible decision. I do know there's always the political angle that everybody tries to see for every elected official, but I try my best to ensure that I'm presenting myself of the data that was before me. So if you were watching today, I shared a lot of data that was presented at the SES meeting, the Special Economic Organization, and sometimes if we could speak in that tone and in that manner, I think we will be much better off, the legislature, because we were just sharing data and we'll make our decisions. But it is what it is at times, and there is times where people are passionate. I don't think there's anything personal down there. I think people are just passionate about their angle. But I hope we will get to that point where a lot of it's data driven.
Doesn't look like it.
I wanted to go back to the candidates and just ask, you all have been involved with politics and campaigns. What do you think it's going to take for somebody like Armando Dominguez to win? Because he was, last place in the 2016 primary.
Yeah.
What I appreciate about Mr. Armando, throughout my term, he's always participated in the process. He's provided testimony on many issues. He's come down to the legislature, so he's been active and engaged on the issues. And I think this is his second or third try.
Right.
But he is persistent, not only in running but also on the issues. So I think if you were following him, you will see that he is engaged. And I think maybe that's something he may have to put across our people. Like I said, so how people get their message across is very key, and how they market that. And I think if he could share with the people that he has been engaged, and I just didn't wake up to yesterday and decide to run. Right. I think people would appreciate that.
And it's not just Armando Dominguez. I'm talking. There's a whole lot of new candidates.
Yeah, and you know what I really like this election. I mean, maybe more on the Democrat side is you have a guy like Armando who's a taxi driver. You have a couple teachers. You have my cousin Bunker. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Who's Bunker?
Bunker, Franklin Bunker Meno.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's not an endorsement. But you have a lot of guys and women who aren't, these career, politician types, or aren't even coming from places like you would expect traditional candidates to come from. So I mean, I like it, and I think it's really a testament to how hard it is. In some ways, it's easy to win, and in some ways, it's hard. Like someone like St. Nicholas, again, Regine. Social media is a big thing for them, but I think a candidate like Armando, who is definitely coming from a walk of life that we don't see enough of in the legislature.
Sure.
That is a struggle for him to get the message out there, and he's obviously very passionate about his stances.
Well, you could see it in the T18 tonight.
So does the Democratic Party need to do more to help grow these candidates and get them out there?
Well, I think the campaign is also dependent on each of how they actually do their strategies, but definitely you have to win the electorate's hearts and the voters. So having to deal with the social media, grassroots, and going to all the functions and introducing yourself to everybody would be also dependent on the candidate, because we have a lot of candidates in
Yeah.
there. And so it would be their own passion and hearts to go out there to actually come out, you know, join all the fundraisers and shake hands and introduce themselves.
It's hard. I mean, as even someone like myself, who I feel is very kind of outgoing and can
Right.
really speak to people easily, I mean, just to cold approach somebody and say, "Hi, I'm Kate Baltazar. I'm running for senator," and then, you know, sometimes it's like, "Oh wow," and other times it's, "Oh yeah, girl." running for senator, sit down, you know. And so you're
Let me
like,
tell you.
okay, yeah. And so
That is a challenge.
now you're in this 20-minute conversation about like 15 topics, you know.
And then meanwhile,
But it's true.
20 other people that you need to connect with are walking by.
Sure.
Yeah.
And but it's like Jezzica said, I mean, you have to be able to go into the far reaches. And I'm saying, like, if you think you know a lot of people, multiply that by like 1,000, because there's like so many people out there that as you mentioned, are not in the walks of life that we associate with.
Right.
You know, they're not in politics, they're not in media, they're not the CEOs or the middle management that we see at all the cocktail places, you know, and the galas and things like that, right? So we think that's a lot of people when we go to those things. But when you're doing things like, I remember, you know, just going down Swamp Road, or going down south, you know, where I have family, you know, and just going door to door. There's so many people that are not at those things, and you have to reach them, every single one of them, if you want to win. Like with any candidate, Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. Each has to touch that ordinary, regular person who is, and maybe not even necessarily grassroots person,
Right.
you know, just a regular resident who works, has children, drives in the morning to work, drives home at night, goes to the grocery store, goes to the post office. I mean, just kind of like, you know, it's the fabric of who we are, you know, in our community. And if you're not touching those people, you're missing a huge segment of our island.
How'd you do it, Senator Morrison? I mean, you're not, you know, like a CEO or a rich guy. I mean, I knew you before you were senator because of your sports background. So I know that kind of gave you like a
Maybe it
little
was
bit
your
of-
write-ups.
Right,
From
yeah.
sports that got me excited. Yeah, I remember you
Right,
in the
right,
field. So,
right.
but I think maybe going back to my childhood and following my parents around,
Right.
and they were engaged in public service all their lives, practically all their lives, and I think that had a lot to do with how I felt things were natural. I mean, things came natural for me out there, and I just went and did what I needed to do. But and I'm very appreciative of the opportunities that I had with serving in different cabinet positions and
Right.
and carrying out those mandates. And I think that got me some exposure. But I think at the end, you talked about some of the social media, the traditional media, grassroots campaigning. You got to put them all together,
Right.
and drive those initiatives that you're running on, and you know however you can make them stick in people's minds when they head to the voting booths is key, and it's repetition and you know you see these pocket meetings out there, and people are sharing their message constantly. You could see that it's keyed on either one or two issues, and
Right.
and they're trying to make those
Make 'em
stick.
stick.
Yes,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of tools today at these folks that are running, and I think they just need to maximize them.
Yeah, you know, I'm not totally sold on social media and elections. I still think they need to, you know, buy a lot of advertising on KUAM.
Certainly.
You know, I want to kind of end here by because we're running out of time. I want to wrap it by asking each of you. Let's play, you know, Chief of Staff, political advisor to Armando Dominguez, Tina Munoz Barnes. You know, 60 seconds. What advice would you give both of them to do, you know, what it takes to win a seat in the legislature? Jezzica.
Well, I think they really need to reach out to the people and win their hearts. And by doing that, like I said in the beginning, there's a lot of ways to do it, either with social media, the newspaper, KUAM, you know, be here and show yourself and tell them what your platform is. And, you know, getting out there in the media, holding their hand and shaking them, and also just saying hello, knocking on their doors. I think, you know, that'll help them get themselves out. I mean, so we have Senator Mooney Barnes, who's already
Got a
been
head
there
start.
and done that.
Right.
Yeah, she's had the head start, and of course, you know, and then we have Armando that's been trying his best, but they're all committed. They're all committed for the public service. So that's one thing that they need to convey to the people and the electorate.
Kate?
I would say start early. Don't decide the year of the election to run. I mean, you really have to get a good head start. Some people could really get away with that, you know, and have won and have been successful. But I would say get a good head start. Plan campaign finance is very key. I would say gravitate towards 2 issues that you want to identify with, and really speak to those with conviction. You know, you can't be all things to all people, right. And people will read through that. You know, every time they talk to you, they'll be able to see that you're just trying to be a people pleaser and not really a problem solver, so to speak. And again, you have to touch as many people as you possibly can. You have to reach them and help them understand in such a short period of time. You know, you probably have 1 or 2 minutes with each person, you know, if that. You know, but go door to door, be relentless. Always be relentless. Go door to door, every single person in every room, and spread the message on those two topics.
Senator Morrison.
I walked this entire island. But, you know, again, the message that came, that I, you know, found a way to brand myself, and what I would share with them is what would be unique that fits you. Mm-hmm. And I branded myself with a baseball card. Yes. And I went out and I was giving out a baseball card with my information, little bio, and what I intend to do. And it wasn't just a regular card, but it's funny, to this day there's some folks that come back to me and say, "Hey, my son has your baseball card." And I say, "Oh, no, that's really not a baseball card. I did play baseball."
Not a collector's item?
Yes, but you know, and something that would stand out, because there's a lot of important messages that are going to be thrown out there, but we talked earlier, what could help it stick, and what could stay in people's minds, and you know, if it's a baseball card or something that fits you, that can not only carry your message, but it will remember you going to the voting booths, then it's something worth trying. But I would advise my candidate that.
Well, thank you so much, Jezzica, Kate, and
so
Tommy
much
for
for
joining
having
us
us. Thank you.
for the after party. Please make sure to go to KUAM.com. We've got voter tips, a story map. We also have a documentary that our UNO team is producing.
My first time.
That's right. So make sure to check that out, all on KUAM.com and our Facebook and our YouTube page. Also, we are taking a break this Wednesday because it is a holiday, the 4th of July. So we will be back on Monday for another edition of D18 Tonight and the after party.
There you go. For Sabrina Salas Matanani, of course, our esteemed panelists. My name is Chris Barnett. Thank you so much for watching D18, the after party at Jaws.